What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about Diablo 4 and comparing it to the previous iterations of the Diablo series 1, 2, and 3, as well as Immortal. So what's essentially new here with Diablo 4, because there's a lot of features with this game that are going to be similar to the previous games, and some things are going to be brand new. So let's go ahead and start it off with the classic Diablo 1. What are the similarities between Diablo 4 and Diablo 1? So let's go ahead and start off with that. So as far as the tone and the atmosphere, I would say, and the NPCs, everyone's kind of in a state where they don't know if they're going to survive. There's not enough food, and I think that it's really cool that the environment feels very believable. It feels like its own complete world. Now, there's misery everywhere as far as like the NPCs go. You can see everything is kind of run down. It was very similar to Diablo 1 in that sort of a state. Now, another thing that's very similar, there was only one town in Diablo 1, but everything seems to be super far away, whereas as we went into like Diablo 2 or 3, everything in town was relatively close by. That's one other similarity that I would say that is similar with Diablo 1 compared to 4. Now, another thing is the way the potion system kind of works. Like, you will definitely potion spam in Diablo 4, just like you would in Diablo 1, like when you take a couple hits. As you progress in the game, it gets more difficult. The game is quite difficult, especially earlier on, when you may not have that many defenses. And then on top of that, obviously, as the game gets harder, even some of the gameplay that they showed off for the end game, because we can't talk about the end game as far as our experiences, but we can talk about the end game that they showed off in the gameplay. You'll see that they do spam potions quite frequently, and that is due to the game actually being quite challenging. Another thing that's more similar to Diablo 1 was that you could die at any point, especially with the elites in this game. Certain elites will have certain modifiers that are really deadly. The vampiric, making it very difficult to kill certain things, or if the enemies freeze you, you are absolutely dead. It's very similar to if you play Diablo 1 and you're getting hit stun locked. That's basically when you get frozen, you can't do anything and you're just kind of dead unless you have an ability to kind of get out of that. There is no cheat death for every single class like you would have in D3. Now, another thing that is actually really cool, and one of my favorite things, is the innate abilities in Diablo 1. Now, the innate things in Diablo 1 were like the warrior could do an item repair, but it would reduce the maximum durability. The sorcerer could repair staves, as well as the rogue being able to see traps. I like that each class had its own special ability. Now, in Diablo 4, what's really cool is every class has its own unique specialization, so to speak. So the necromancer obviously has its summons, but you can change how the summons kind of work. Like, basically, the skeleton can be different, the golem, and the sorcerer actually has this ability to enhance certain skills. The barbarian has like this weapon specialization. I won't go into details of every single one because this video will last way too long, but basically each class is separate not only from their skill choice, but they each have some sort of like interesting mechanic to them, and they all are tied to basically doing a quest. If you've played Path of Exile, it almost feels like you are ascending when you complete this sort of like quest line that enables some special thing, and I think this is one of the coolest things in Diablo 4 that they haven't really talked about or explained in some of their videos. Now I'm going to move on to Diablo 2, everyone's fan favorite, and I've played thousands and thousands of hours of D2. It's one of my favorite action RPGs of all time, and I would still argue it's one of the best action RPGs. This is the game that I grew up on. Every day after school, all I would do is hop on Diablo 2 and do like either doing meth runs or bale runs, or back when cow runs were super popular. I'm really OG when it comes to Diablo 2, especially with the trading. I played back in the day when they had the hex charms. I played when they had the OC rings. Like, I've been playing Diablo 2 online for a very long time. And so as far as the changes with Diablo 4 and the differences between Diablo 4 and Diablo 2, like, what are the most similar things that stand out? So as far as the gameplay goes, in Diablo 2, we kind of picked one skill. We mostly stick with that one skill, with the exception of like if we were a hybrid sorceress or a character that needed to do two different elements because something was immune, back before we had like the new Sunder charms, right? So what it comes down to is Diablo 4 will let you use a lot more abilities, but earlier on, at the first few set of levels, it feels very similar to Diablo 2 in terms of the gameplay pace, if that makes any sense. Like, you only start off with one skill, and then you kind of upgrade the skill, and you do a little bit of tweaking to the skill, but it's not like a rune where it completely changes up the skill. What will completely change up the skill, this is where it's kind of more similar to Immortal. You have an item that basically rolls with the rune that you would normally get in, let's say, Diablo 3, where you know how we can change up the skill via the rune. That's more similar in this game, where your legendary item affects the skill, which is where it ties into more into like the immortal category. And again, it's more like Diablo 2, where again you get your skill, then you have to wait until something drops, then it modifies, if that makes any sense. In terms of the build complexity and the skills, it's very similar to Diablo 2. You can put multiple skill points into one skill, and that basically gives you more numbers or duration, less cooldown, something along the lines of that. So there's where the similarities of Diablo 2 in terms of its skills go. There's no crafting, like going over like what's completely different. There's not really crafting. Crafting is more like Diablo 3. It's basically like the enchantment system where you get one roll and you kind of change it. That's more similar to Diablo 3. But there's no runes anymore. And I say anymore because I've covered in videos how to actually make a rune ward in Diablo 4, but I think that they're moving the system. My honest guess is they're going to move this to an expansion DLC, because they already had the rune system, they already had the different rune words already made completely, and I have gameplay that shows how to craft a rune word. Basically how a rune word works is everything is a 2 rune word. That's how it used to be. It might be completely different when the game comes out. Maybe they'll launch with it. I don't know. But basically, as far as I'm aware of, runes are removed from the game in its current state. Now, what's also similar to Diablo 2 is the cost to respecking. So if you want to basically change your character, it's not like where you get like a token of absolution and you can completely change. Or if you played Diablo 2 Median XL, the Bella Madonna, right? That's a really awesome Diablo 2 mod. Definitely check it out, by the way, if you haven't. That's where the similarities would lie, again, in your respecking. It's not completely free. Like in Diablo 2, if you're like, you know, I'm a Whirlwind Barb, I want to play a Frenzy Barb, you can just change everything on the fly. This, you're going to have to make a brand new character. And like, when I was growing up, that was just the thing. It was just a normal thing. Like, I made a lot of weird builds in Diablo 2, like a fire. You can make like some really weird things with certain like +2 like fire skills. There's also the Barbarian that can transform into a werewolf, or there is the Werebear sorceress. That was also another thing. Like, there's a lot of weird things that you can do in Diablo 2, where I didn't really feel like that there was that many things that are very odd in Diablo 4, so that's another thing that I would consider like completely different. In terms of the game's pace, I mentioned that it was very similar to Diablo 2, but there's an exception: without Enigma. You can't just teleport around like crazy. You do get a jump, so you have extra mobility. And another thing that's similar to Diablo 2 is you cannot be immune to all CC, like have Wrath of the Berserker or Vengeance if you play Demon Hunter in Diablo 3, with like 100% uptime, being immune to everything. Everything in the game feels like it's more grounded, I think is their official term that they're calling it, where, you know, the game is a little bit more similar to Diablo 2. Obviously, it's a fan favorite. They've taken in a lot of feedback. And in terms of the pace, I would say earlier on, maybe there's going to be certain unique that is literally Enigma and lets us infinitely teleport with all the different classes. But for the most part, it's more grounded. It's a little bit slower paced for sure. But you do have a little jump, and that allows you to move out of the way if there's like a giant boss and he has like this giant AoE on the ground. And that's where it's similar to Diablo 3. I'm sure some of you guys have seen like the Frozen in Diablo 3, like these modifiers from the elites, right? They would throw certain things on the ground and you just have to dodge them, or like there's the laser that spins around clockwise or counterclockwise. Those things are similar to Diablo 3. Like, those exist as elite affixes on the monsters. There are newer ones as well, but it incorporates more of an active playstyle. Like, you can't just sit there and just take all the damage. You have to move. If you're frozen, like I mentioned before, it's like Diablo 1. If you're hit with like too much hit stun, or in this case, it's like if you're getting frozen or chilled too much, you're just dead. And I kind of like that excitement here. In terms of Diablo 3 and the drop system, because people wonder, like, is it easy to get items? What I can share with you guys, because I was only able to talk about the beta that was like relatively earlier in the game, as far as the drops go, it was more like Diablo 2. I would say the drops were a little bit better than D2, like as in it was more frequent, versus Diablo 3, you know, like you get legendaries quite frequently. And obviously, with the higher tier difficulties, the different health difficulties, more likely you're going to get better loot via doing certain like quests and other things in the game that are very similar to like the bounty system. You kind of have like these dailies. Those tend to give you pretty good rewards. So that is where I would say the loot is definitely better than D2 in terms of frequency, but it's not as frequent as Diablo 3 in its current state. Also, similar things with Diablo 3, everyone gets their own loot. You no longer have to fight over, this item dropped, it's mine, and I like that.
Yes, I like that.
I think that's our overall, like, great change for the game. I know some people do like that idea of, like, I get it, and everyone sees that it drops, and, you know, you're the only one that gets it. So, I think that that overall is probably better for the game, though, so people don't have to argue, or I know in Path of Exile, it's like, an item drops for certain players, and they have, like, 5 or 10 seconds to pick it up, and if they don't pick it up, then everyone can pick it up. I don't know what the golden ground is for this because people like different things, but again, that's the current system in the game. As far as like kind of what's new for the game that other games don't have in the series. So in Diablo 4, you're not only using one skill for damage. I mentioned earlier on, yes, you do that for a while because you literally don't have a skill bar. But in Diablo 4, you basically run through your entire roster of skills. And I think that's pretty cool. In Diablo 3, I would say we kind of had like our main skills for damage, and the rest were pretty much buffs or other things that would activate to boost up the other skills. Everything in this game pretty much is going to be active. You do sometimes, depending on your build, you may have like a resource generator, a resource spender, and then you have some utility. Usually something to get out of CC is really important unless you get freeze immunity, which you can get in Diablo 4, at least in the current state. I don't know if that will change, but that thing is very important to get. You use multiple skills for your damage here for the most part. And then on top of that, the character customization, that's completely new. Now, going back to Diablo 3 over here, as far as customization goes. Now, character customization is brand new, like where we get to create our character, we get to change our facial structures and all of that good stuff. But in Diablo 3, we can transmog. That's a system that's similar to Diablo 4. So if you like the transmog system in Diablo 3, it's basically the same thing. You get an item, you like the way it looks, just equip it, and I love it, and it's basically free. As far as like in the current state, you don't have to pay for like a cosmetic like skin transfer like in PoE, like you'd have to pay for. You get it for free, which is awesome. The difference is also it's always online, so there's no like mod support, which I've mentioned already. There's no companion or mercenary. As far as the dungeons go, it's kind of new. I know in some like Diablo mods they would have dungeons that would go like multiple tiers. In this, they don't really go to multiple levels. It's kind of like more similar in a sense to a GR in Diablo, where like you go through, there's usually some sort of a quest, and then you, at the very end, usually you're fighting a boss, but sometimes you can have different quests in there. There's also the terror zones, which have a unique zone, which will have monsters that will drop very specific like currency, and then you use these currencies to basically get to choose what sort of reward you want. Now you can choose like maybe like rings, and it's a different area. It's almost like a terror zone. It's like a limited time thing. It is brand new to the series, but it's kind of like a timed event. So you got to be on when these happen, but don't worry. It's not like you have to be on at a very specific time of a day. Like in Immortal, I know that there's certain quests and certain things that you have to be on very specific times. It's not like that. It's just like every, I don't know what the number is, maybe every like 2 hours or something like that. This area, you want to go in this area, then it's gone for a while, and then later as you just keep playing, it'll be like, oh, this area is now a Helltide zone, so you can go over there and do the objectives and basically get the little like shards for that mechanic. Another thing that's new is there's this dedicated PvP area that is tied to getting these like red shards, and you get these red shards as currency for cosmetic only items. There's no queued PvP system. There's also these herb gathering like resources like iron and different little plants that you can gather. It grants you extra potion slots as you progress, so you'll have more potions. You can also get plus potions on legendary pieces of gear, or like it can be a roll. And there's also the ability as you disenchant things to get plus power. It's not really super interesting, but plus 5 power, and you can roll it like 5 times on each piece of gear, so overall it adds up, but it's not something super important to mention that's completely game changing. It's just a few like power numbers that increase. Think of it kind of like CR if you played Diablo Immortal, like combat resonance, like your character's numerical number stat that needs to match, otherwise you may not do a certain amount of like damage in terms of like thresholds for numbers to meet the area's like requirement, if that kind of makes sense. The story cutscenes are kind of new. Like in Diablo 2, even D3, we had some cutscenes to kind of tie in between to break up the combat, but Diablo 4 does it much better because it's like your character, you get to see it, and that's something I would consider brand new as well. But as far as the potions go, it's more like Diablo like 1/2, where you basically just have them and you pop them. However, it's not where there is a variety of potions. There's no thawing potions. There's no like stamina potion, antidote potion. There's none of these like crazy potions. I mean, in fact, most of them, most people didn't really know about or use. But like a lot of people didn't know like you can pop thawing potion to get extra cold res. There's a lot of weird things that things just weren't available. We didn't have the internet back then, so we just were like, what's the point? We just have your HP and mana pots, or you had your rejuve potions. As far as I'm aware of, there's no rejuve potion, but there may be some uniques later down the line that can modify how the potions work, and I think that would be kind of cool. There are other potions in the game, but they're not really used. Like you pop them for like a duration, but they're not something where you can just keep on stacking like a bunch of them in your inventory. They're kind of more specialized. But Overall, wrapping things up, the other newer change though is the mount system. So the mount system, I would say overall, to be honest, my impressions on the mount system are completely unnecessary for the game. You have waypoints to get from point A to point B, and on top of that, a lot of areas will have rope that you need to swing across, or there'll be like these stairs that you have to like climb on rocks, or certain like mechanics where your character on the horse can't just go across. You'll have to do like the traversal mechanic, and so I feel like they can maybe make that smoother. Like how it works is you have a button for your mount, you call your mount, then it comes down, then you have to click on your mount, then it gets on the mount, and then you can start going on your mount. And then you come up to an area where you cannot cross as the mount, then you have to demount. And then sometimes the horse is in the way and you accidentally click on it. It's honestly pretty clunky. So I think that the horse should be a dedicated button and it should instantly mount you. Even though it may not look visually as cool as the horse coming in and then you click on the horse can just get in the way of combat as well. Like sometimes you dismount from your horse because you want to do combat and the horse is just in the way. Honestly, the horse is a new system, but in its current state, I think they can do a little bit better with it, and hopefully some feedback will make the mount system a little bit smoother, but it's just cosmetic at the end of the day. Maybe we can progress and get, cooler looking mounts. I know that there is a mount that you can get from PvP that's all like a bloodied up horse. It's kind of cool looking, but as far as that goes, that's something new, but I don't think it really matters too much. Now, overall, my closing thoughts, because a lot of people have asked, is this game for Diablo 3 fans? Is it for Diablo 2 fans? Is it for Diablo 1 fans? Here's what I kind of want to say with this. If you like Diablo 3, I think you'll like this game for the gameplay mechanics. Now, visuals, it's more like Diablo 1 and 2. However, in terms of the complexity, it's kind of yet to be seen with this game. We have the Paragon board system. Most of it, and I've mentioned it several times, is kind of new. Like they have their own Paragon system where you can socket things inside of the Paragon board, but most of them are just numerical number changes. So it's more in the D3 realm of the Paragon system. However, there is more potential for complexity where I would lie it more in like the Path of Exile, where you can socket something that affects certain nodes within a radius, and that's exciting for me. So it's kind of like up in the air in terms of how complex the game can be. In terms of like crafting, like I said, it's basically D3. We don't have a Kanai's cube, so we can throw things in and just kind of make things like you would with a Herodic cube and crafting. Like, crafting, you could craft some pretty good amulets in Diablo 2. It's quite rare, but it's possible, right? So if you're like those players that really like to tinker with a lot of weird things, I would say it's kind of up in the air. We'll have to wait and see what unique can come out that completely change up some builds, because there are some cool uniques in the game, and uniques are actually different than legendaries. I dropped a video and I'll pin it down below, but I actually covered every single legendary that was in Diablo 4, and some of them are actually quite interesting. So if you guys haven't checked out that video, definitely check it out. Keep in mind, things are subject to change here. But yeah, if you're a D3 fan, I think that you'll enjoy this game a lot. It will be a little bit more challenging. So if you like the challenge of Diablo 1 and 2, especially in the earlier stages, you could play the game at a harder difficulty, and I think that that difficulty will present a challenge for you. Now, if you're a Diablo 1 fan, honestly, this game is so fast. Diablo 1 has definitely aged in terms of how the speed goes, but if you like that eerie town, I would say that that's kind of what you're maybe something to look forward to, is just kind of the feel of the environment and the atmosphere in Diablo 1. But like the gameplay is so far different than Diablo 1. But that game is kind of outdated for the most part in terms of its grid system and how slow you move, which most Diablo mods at this point have just let you basically run across, because it's just so much more efficient. Like in terms of like Diablo 1 having these multiple tier like levels inside of a dungeon, it's not really gonna have that. But what it does offer that Diablo 1 fans probably would like, and this is one of my favorite things, is that innate skill that's built into the character, I would say. There's no oils, by the way. This was a question that I saw before, and I didn't forget it this time. Oils are not in the game. Oils was a thing that was added into the Hellfire expansion of Diablo 1, which I think it was a really cool idea. It was a way to basically upgrade your character further, which could be similar to Diablo 4 in the sense where like you're just getting enchantments on it, but it was just another way for you to progress your character in a different way. Now, if you are a fan of Diablo Immortal, I think that you will absolutely love this game. Like I said before, like if you're a Diablo 3 fan, I would say Diablo 3 and Immortal, in terms of the gameplay mechanics, they are very similar, and you have those like bosses where there's like, certain things that you need to dodge. Yeah, if you're an Immortal fan, I think that you would like this game. Again, Diablo Immortal fans, Diablo 3 fans, I could already give like the double thumbs up that you will really like this game. For Diablo 2 fans, I'm kind of waiting to see the complexity, because I think that that's where it lies, but it definitely has a little bit more rare loot. So if you like the chase of getting some really rare items, the drop rates in this game are definitely a lot lower than D3 in its current state. But there's also things that are going to be keeping up with modern games, and I would say things like daily quests. I don't know if they're doing daily logins, but battle pass progression, we have XP boosts, and things along the lines of things to progress your account are going to be tied to the battle pass, and that's going to be something that is going to be seen in this game that's kind of evolving with the modern games. And this is kind of how I feel about this. I've never been a fan of daily quests. I never liked the idea of doing daily chores. Like you see this and you're like, oh, I gotta do this, right? Unless you really enjoy doing every mechanic. But let's be honest, I think in any video game, there's always some mechanic that people don't enjoy. When you have a certain quest that you need to do because the reward is so good, I don't think games should ever do that in terms of sense. Let the players do what they want to get the gear that they want. I know certain bosses in Diablo 2 like have a higher drop chance for certain things. So there's even, things that you had to do that you might not want to do even in D2 going, further back in the game. But in terms of like daily quests, I've never been a fan of that. But the way that it works is actually kind of nice in Diablo 4 because you basically just need what's called grim favors to reach a threshold. Once you do enough of them, you get to go to an area and then you get rewarded for it. It's like a bounty cash, if you will, if you play Diablo 3, that you can get. So there is some sort of way where it's like if you really just don't like doing there's grim favors as a reward for a PvP, and if you're like, I don't want to do the PvP stuff, they at least allow you to kind of do something along the lines of like you can kind of do something else, but it may reward less, or you may not want to enjoy that certain region, because certain regions, they're really, really big, just as a heads up. But anyways, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for the video. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and if you have any questions, and I'm curious to know what you guys think of in terms of Diablo 4. Do you guys think it's more like Diablo 1, 2, 3, or is it closer to Immortal? Definitely let me know in the comment section below, but I think there's enough content that it stands on its own, but in terms of like the gameplay mechanics, more similar to Diablo 3 really than any of the other ones, and in terms of itemization and like the whole crafting, which is like the enchant, but it definitely has that tone of Diablo 2 and kind of the gameplay pace of the game, if that makes sense, and the rarity. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up things. If you guys enjoyed it, drop a like on it. If you're new here and you want to see more Diablo videos in the future, subscribe to the bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care. I'm out. Peace.